values to valued culture. Here is your host, Will Scott, interviewing another CEO about leading culture in their company.
Okay, well, first I'd like to welcome the subscribers to another Culture Czars interview where we interview CEOs that care about their corporate culture. We want to help employees the world over, Rachel, like their work and believe that they are making a meaningful contribution through the work they do and that they feel valued. And so we do that by encouraging their employer companies to not just have core values, but to truly have a valued culture. And here we're en route to creating 2020 Culture Czars by 2020. And today we are interviewing Culture Czar Rachel Nielsen of Result Drivers. Rachel, start by telling us a little bit about Result Drivers and how you got started with your business.
Well, how I got started with the business was that it was actually in corporate meeting and event planning. And I saw that our actions had an impact. And what we were doing to control our message or influence people had a business impact. And I've always been in love with business and specifically other people's business. And that I learned the cause and effect and understood the impact of an action. So a lot of what we've done with both the advanced events and result drivers is taking that result that matters methodology of the critical decision-making process and the complex project management. And we're out there, they're just making huge things happen for both nonprofits and entrepreneurial second-stage companies.
Boy, that's really exciting. Well, congratulations. And how long ago did you get into this?
Well, I fell into it somewhat by mistake when I was in college.
The way so many businesses start.
Exactly. I was on track for one thing, and I started following my passion instead of what I was on track for. And eventually I started my company. It'll be almost 11 years ago right now.
That's awesome. Congratulations. And what's the interesting picture you've got behind you there?
Yeah. Well, it is an original artwork, not by me, but by a local artist. And it was something that we were doing work with. Thanks for asking. And it really takes the explanation of what our companies are. This is a lot of color and just a lot of activity going on, chaos, if you will. And what we do is we take chaos and we organize it into a perfect on-target result.
I see that. That's awesome. Well, hopefully you'll help me take the chaos in this interview and sort that into something tidy and message.
Yep, we always see beauty.
Okay, well, thank you very much for letting us into the world of Result Drivers there. That's very cool. How would you describe the culture in your company, Rachel?
The culture in our company is something that is literally remarked upon. It's not just something that you feel. It's a language here, both internally and externally. And I think the easiest way to summarize that is telling you how many of our vendors and our clients talk to us about wanting to do either more work with us or work on our team. It isn't just something that we create a great result. It's that they remark on the fun we have while we're doing it, that we seem like such a close team, that we really understand and support one another. And that to me means that I'm doing it right. And something that's really unique, what I think is unique, is that we're not just full-time employees. We have a significant amount of 1099 contract staff. So getting that quickly onboarded to people who align with us is something that we work pretty hard at. So it's definitely a language here.
That's very cool. It sounds like that language extends a little bit, or at least the understanding of your culture extends upstream to your vendors and downstream to your customers. Which is really cool. I definitely encourage leaders to not just think of themselves as leading a company, but really lead, which is, which makes you think of the four walls, but leading a culture where it's really a community for your business beyond simply your company. And if you can get values aligned with vendors and customers and other stakeholders, I just think you have an awesome, aligned, cultural community then that goes beyond the company.
It is. It's 100% that well, but it's even more so the way that we lead with it isn't so much to say, these are our values. What are your values? Do they line up? It isn't as structured as that. It's much more organic in let's have fun together. Let's have common good people come together to do great things. And our number one core value, the value that my company was originally founded on before I even knew what a value was that the old full meeting management company that I worked for no longer respected me as an individual. My life was changing. And they didn't want to change with me. So that's what I mean by it was happenstance. It kind of happened to me that I founded the company on the belief that we are people first, and that we have to treat one another as people, as whole people. And sometimes your personal life needs a little more attention, or sometimes a coworker is going to step up because you need a little bit more flexibility for yourself. Or I was a young mother at the time. I needed to sometimes be able to tell people I'm going to be out during this portion of my life because guess what? I'm a mom.
Yeah.
And it was that original, I guess, attack on my core value that I wasn't a full person. That's how I started the company. So great people, understanding and respecting one another can do great things together.
Absolutely. And if you can describe the environment and the values with so few words, then it's much easier to operate within that sphere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's the structure, right? That's the structure. If we look at my artwork here, hey, look at how nice this is. But it's that part of you need to put some structure to the words, to the feelings, and that's our values.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to, actually it was one of my interviews yesterday, and they were saying how they didn't feel listened to in a prior place of work, and therefore didn't feel valued. And that's, speaks to one of the reasons that we do this work at Czars is we want employees to feel valued in their work and feel like they're making a meaningful contribution. And when you can do that, it's just so powerful. But if you're not doing it, people tend to vote with their feet and go elsewhere.
Or worse, they vote with their mouth and they can work against you.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes going away is the best thing you can hope for.
That's, very good point. Perhaps I should have started by asking, what do you think of when we talk about corporate culture, Rachel? What does that mean to you?
What does it mean to me? Culture is something that you feel and you can identify when it's good. You can feel it's alive, it aligns with you. And when it's bad, you can feel how toxic it is. So to me, it's a living, breathing element, but it's beyond that. Culture is what makes you feel, like you were saying, heard. It makes you feel empowered. It makes you feel able. At the same time, it can be the thing that deteriorates your stability or your self-worth.
Yeah. You mentioned toxic. Have you ever worked anywhere where the culture really was toxic?
I did. Not only have I worked, but I also work with clients that have toxic cultures. So it's something that we literally almost have to arm ourselves against sometimes when we go into those toxic cultures. But my particular story was when I was about 4 years out of college, and I had been there for about 2 years. And it was management kept changing. It was just a strange environment. And what sticks out is my still physical response of when I would go to work and I'd get to the front door and I would look at my hand and I would keep looking at my hand saying, touch the door now, touch the door, twist the knob, you can go in. I would have this struggle. My body didn't want to go in. And my pocketbook said better.
Isn't that crazy? And I just wonder how many employers or how many places of work employees are having that feeling before they step into their work, and how productive are they in that situation? Crazy.
Well, I mean, I was running a staff of 25 at that particular, and I was one of 9 departments, so that's a couple hundred people who were
Yeah.
Under that roof.
Yeah.
It was tough.
And if you were able to flip the switch in that particular environment and make it a culture where people did love coming to work and did feel like there was meaning and that they enjoyed their work, I wonder what the productivity factor would be for a company like that of 200 people.
I can tell you for certain, in this particular instance, they'd be winning world championships.
Right. Yeah. So why not? Why don't more people take the investment to really try and create that environment where people thrive? Yeah.
There's lots of thoughts on that one, right?
Yeah. So, have you gone as far as defining core values in your company? You mentioned one that right from when you started. So are these written down somewhere? And
They are, and we have not only identified them, they were identified quite a while ago when I was exposed to identifying them. It wasn't something that I sought out to do. I was exposed and thought, hey, I better look at that. And just as recently as I had a pretty big incident happen, and then when we were kind of relaunching some things, we reevaluated them using the EOS system, and it turned out that we had one major one that I thought was so important that we had to change, because when we did the always, sometimes, never activity of who elicited that that value, I was one of the main people who violated it.
Oh,
so that was an interesting one. But yes, we do. So,
and the employees felt the power to sort of call you out on that. That's pretty cool.
They did, and it was something that when we went through the activity. So let me go to what it was called. The core value was easy and fun. That we are easy and fun. We have fun at work. We make it easy, and we are easy and fun to our clients to work with. It didn't stand up to the litmus test. It did from an external perspective that we make it easy and fun, but it did not stand up to the litmus test of our own teams. And the value has now been placed with laughter counts. And we have a lot of discussion around that. It was a 2.5 day discussion. But it turns out that because one of our other, what I say is, we take our results seriously, but not ourselves. We do work to a very superior level here, and it is an absolute expectation. So when that is being threatened, it is not easy and it is not fun, because we're getting into it and we're holding one another accountable to that outcome. And so we had to change that. When we're in those intense moments, when we have to make things work, laughter still counts, respect still counts, but it is not necessarily going to be easy and fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really cool to hear you name one of the core values as having the word fun in there, because you talked earlier about how you connect with customers and so on using that. So that's a great example of how you really do live and breathe your core values. So did you use any particular process for defining your core values back when you did that?
We did. We followed traction with the EOS system. Went through observing behaviors and did the full activities and had everybody involved in it. I went as far to even go out to externally, because again, I don't believe we operate in a bubble. We cannot be successful without our key vendors and partners. We knew that we liked to partner with some more than others. And we had some great clients that we absolutely loved, and people were clamoring to be on their projects. And we had some other clients that they were not. So we looked at it very holistically as to the work we do, the people we invite into our inner circles, as well as our internal staff.
Okay, very cool. Yes, Traction, or the Entrepreneur Operating System, definitely has a process in there for determining core values, and they believe it's a very important part of any company's vision and part of the 8 questions, as they call it. Yes. How aware are your employees of these core values, and would they be able to recite them if stopped in the hallway?
Yes, probably half. I would say everyone can name half of them. We have six beliefs and 6 behaviors.
Okay.
And I would say that there's probably a top 3 that everybody would align with.
Yeah. And are there some things that you do to encourage them to use them, or to, talk about those on a daily, weekly, monthly basis?
So we do a couple of different things. And I feel like I sound like a broken record, so feel free to edit this out. But it's the external portion of how we look at our culture and our values. So we evaluate one another on our values. At some point, we even have everybody on our staff at some point or another is client facing, and I protect my reputation very, very seriously, and that worried me. Right, that was something that I can't be everywhere every time as we grow, as I'm not interacting with all the clients. I was looking at how was everybody else always representing the company and themselves. And so we took turns leading our own internal meetings. It rotates. And then after each meeting, each staff meeting, we grade one another on our core values and what did they bring to that particular meeting. Did they hit it? Was it present? Did they violate it? Is there room for improvement? So it becomes very present in our daily conversations. We also, anytime that we're closing a project, we are looking at, did we honor our values here? Was there anything from a process perspective that we need to change? Are there things that we can... So one of our core values is that we respect the result. The pretty terms are that we're in love with the outcome, not the process. And so we to change or throw away process is pretty common here because we're in love with that particular outcome given that particular landscape. So again, we talk about if there's something that we kind of want to keep or get rid of or duplicate or things like that. So
cool. And I like that. Respect the result is one of the core values of result drivers.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. So again, just integration of the core values with everything you're doing, including the name of your company. So that's good. No, it definitely sounds like that you believe, managing culture deliberately rather than letting it come about by default is important to you. You wanted to tell a story about when you made a particular mistake that in the business? Yes. Well, to sort of back up, I pay attention even more so now. I made a pretty big mistake in the beginning of the company, and when I was introduced to EOS specifically and values, I did the work because I wanted to be a good leader. I didn't do it because it was incredibly important to me. Then I made the mistake, and now I see how important it is. So it's I didn't have I have hindsight now, and basically I'll tell the story pretty quickly here. I had hired somebody to run the company, and I was really trying to launch result drivers. It's more of where my passion in strategic leadership and more of the consulting work. It was taking me out of the day-to-day. I wanted to get out of the day-to-day. So in my eagerness to hire somebody to do that, I also gave them culture. I didn't hand it over saying, here, you take it. I unknowingly gave them culture. And because I was so enamored with not having to do the day-to-day, off and running, and I didn't see it. And I didn't see the damage. I lost clients, I lost relationships, I lost key staff members. And over 18 months, it was so awful. So when I finally picked my head up out of the sand, and I started really digging in, I understood you can't give culture away and expect to still have it when you just peek back in. So when I was taking the company back, and I have to theme everything, so it was called Catch and Release. I was realizing it wasn't just catch, reorganize, release. It was do not release culture. And I did. It was a learning for me, and I'm luckily surrounded by some great people who will tell me when I'm
absolutely wrong.
So the lesson there is that you, as the leader of the company and the CEO, definitely need to own and manage and lead culture in the company. Yeah.
Yes. And when you give, if you give it up, even if it's unintentional, you've given up the keys to everything.
Yeah. And when you say keys to everything, I mean, where do you think managing culture ranks amongst managing, let's say, I don't know, customer development or the pipeline or, the finances of the company? Where does culture rank in all the other priorities of a CEO?
Well, it's interesting because companies can be incredibly successful outsourcing the majority of things, right? You can outsource your financials. You can outsource business development and sales lead generation. You can outsource accounting and quarterlies and reporting. You cannot outsource culture. And so if you look at it as a fundamental operation of the integrity of a company, it has to come before all other things.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard some people say if you get the culture right, everything else basically will follow.
Because for me, I look at, I'm being hired for the product, and we're not building widgets. We're not selling a thing. We are selling our brains, a process, and our people. And that perspective, it's something that must resonate. They're not going to buy it. And that's, if I don't want to be a commodity, and I don't want to be a commodity, I don't want to have to get into the pennies and dollars conversation. I want to be invaluable. And that comes from living who we are consistently.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Do you have you told us a story about, where you didn't enjoy the culture. Do you have a particular story about an employee or something that's happened that relates to core values that you like to tell from your time in with result drivers?
Well, this is really more of a holistic, it's both internal and external story. And I think what I would probably come up with is, so what I lost an account. I'm sorry, I lost a bid. It wasn't even an account. And that was really painful because I wanted this account. So I spent the next 2 years pursuing it, fixing some things, waiting for the right opportunity, rebidding, and we won the account. And then we went into operating. Eventually became a very, very great client. It was our biggest contract. Our for us, a management fee of over 6 figures in 1 calendar year is very significant. And we had a 3-year contract with them. I had spent the next 2 years waiting for the right time to rebid the client. We won. We were operating very successfully. At that time, we then went into the biggest individual contract we'd ever had. It was over 6 figures of consulting fees annually, and we had a 3-year contract. So it was something absolutely incredible for us to have. And then I started realizing that absolutely none of the staff wanted to work on it. And it became this hot potato. And I sat back and I thought, what am I asking? I'm telling people I respect them. I'm telling us that we're people first, respect the result, make it easy and fun, count on abilities, create wow moments in turn. Like, nobody wants this. So I started to really look at it and realized if I looked at all of our values and I evaluated the client as well and their behavior and their work, it violated every one of them, every one of our core values. So I had met with our financial advisors and said, what can I afford to not have this business? What's it going to take for me to walk away?
So you were considering firing a customer because they didn't fit with your core values or don't fit with your culture, basically.
Within 45 days of the contract, we contacted them and offered to transition them to another provider who would fit with them based on their values and ours. It wasn't going to work, and we didn't want to pursue the relationship, and we would be happy to help transition them to another source. And in all of that, knees shaking, stomach in a knot because I don't know if I'm going to pay all my bills. And not only did we replace the work within, it was about 5 months that it took me to replace it completely, but the response from the staff and the commitment that I showed to them to live the values, that shifted everything. And that's really one of the times that I realized this is much more than an indicator. This is the Bible, and we've got to live these things in order to survive.
Gosh, that's awesome. I'm glad I asked I asked you for a story. That's already good. Of course, people do fire customers occasionally, probably not often enough, but occasionally for, they're constant late payers, or they just suck energy from the team, or and they're just high maintenance. But that's awesome to hear that you've kind of figured that out, came to that conclusion based on the values that you have.
And based on my team's reaction, like I had to watch them to see how much they were violating. I knew how I felt, but to be able to watch them as people reacting was really eye-opening.
And it speaks to what we were talking about earlier, where, you truly are as a leader managing, if you think of managing a culture, that extends beyond the four walls of simply managing a company. And if you have your customers aligned and everything else, things just go a lot more smoothly. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And happy.
Yeah.
Happy.
Right. And your employees like working on that account. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this has been really, really awesome, Rachel. Last question is, do you have a piece of advice that you would share with our listeners from your experience managing culture?
You know what? And not that I like to give advice, because there's always landscape and circumstances. But what's interesting to me as a leader, right? I'm always looking at how do I develop, either augment my weaknesses or develop my strengths. And what's interesting is that culture is a soft skill. It's an emotional intelligence factor. And that to me is really interesting because, being a little bit vulnerable here, let's just say I'm a leader who doesn't make every decision based on her financial statements. Let's just say that it's not something I'm incredibly confident about, right? If I'm being questioned on my financials, to me, that feels like an attack because I don't have all of my answers, right? It's something that I'm not strong on. Other leaders are not as strong in emotional intelligence. And I think that might be why culture doesn't rank as high, or values and identifying them doesn't rank as high. It's not black and white. You have to read the gray. You have to be aware. You have to work at it. And for a leader who isn't completely comfortable in the emotional intelligence arena, if you can open and not feel attacked, but feel enlightened, I think that would be a huge benefit for a lot of employees out there.
Yeah. That's huge. And you mentioned emotional intelligence. I think CEOs often don't pay enough attention to the softer skills or the softer side of business, managing people, environment, and so on. But if they do, then we're all humans and we have feelings. If they do, then we're likely to tap into those feelings that make us, again, achieve those things that we were talking about earlier. Feeling good about going to work, feeling like you're making a valuable contribution, feeling valued. Super way to finish our interview today, Rachel. Thank you so much for being a part of the Czars series of CEO interviews, and congrats on your culture and the success of your results drivers. It's a joy to see you feeling, good about your culture and happy and aligned, and I think the success of your business is reflecting that.
Well, thank you. It's a joy, right? We talk about having fun at work, and if I'm going to be somewhere besides my family or near water somewhere, then it better be for fun.
Yes, quite. And the last time we met, we were enjoying a drink with a beautiful view, weren't we, down the Chicago River?
Down the Chicago River. See, I was getting good friends, great conversation, and water all at once. So I was probably at my happiest.
Well, let's be sure to do it again before winter comes.
Absolutely. I owe you next time, and thank you for this opportunity, Will. It's what you're doing with Czars is It's not an easy undertaking, but I'm sure you're going to be incredibly successful, one company at a time.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web at culturezars.com, and we'll see you next time.